Ready? House will come to order. Members will please take your seats. We are ready to move on. Good afternoon. Members will please take your seats and give us your attention. Give your attention. The clerk is getting ready to read some privilege resolutions. Mr. Clerk, will you please read a group of privileged resolutions?
Honoring the life and memory of Representative Letitia Tish Nagisi. Recognizing and commending Bruce Paul Onobrapeya. Recognizing and commending Arun Jaden. Recognizing and commending Imran Niazi. Recognizing and commending Ambassador Amina Amira Smiley. Recognizing and commending Dr. O.K. Anue Iagu. Recognizing and commending Salman Ajani. Honoring the work of Georgia Gwinnett College in educating and preparing its students for success in their future careers, commending and congratulating Calvin Peterson, congratulating the EC Bullets Gravely 14U Fast Pitch Softball Team, commending Corporal Jerry A. Parrish, recognizing Jack Bowerly, proud native of Glenside, Pennsylvania, commending Gwendolyn S. Taylor, recognizing and commending Am Dougal, recognizing and commending Reverend Dr. Clayton Eugene Taylor Sr., recognizing the Georgia Association of Convenience Stores, recognizing March 23, 2023 as Reach Out and Read Day at the State Capitol, congratulating the Bleckley County High School One Act program for coming in first place, congratulating and commending Green Love Kitchen upon its 8th anniversary, congratulating and commending Amanda Stallings for receiving the 2023 Yellow Rose Nikki T. Randall Servant Leader Award, commending and congratulating Jenny Cook, remembering Muhammad Ali, recognizing the 80-year anniversary of the establishment of the J.A. Jones Shipyard, recognizing March 23, 2023 is DeKalb Day, commending and congratulating Madison Smith, recognizing April 7th, 2023 as Community Legacy Leaders and Activists Day at the State Capitol, recognizing and commending Ruby Bozeman Davis, recognizing and commending the City of Pine Lake Chief of Police, Sari Yuta Green, recognizing and commending Fred Cephas, commending the student leaders of the Student Government Association of the University of Georgia, commending Fabershaw Flint, recognizing and commending Crooked Creek Baptist Church on the occasion of its 220th anniversary, recognizing and commending James Newland, recognizing the efforts of the Atlanta Humane Society, recognizing the Festival of Navras, as well as the Shia Ismaili Muslim community, commending Randy Stafford, Rome High School's 2023 star teacher, commending Shira Garg, Rome High School's 2023 star student, recognizing and commending Pastor Earl L. Calloway Sr., recognizing and commending Banks County Sheriff Carlton Speed, commending the Muskogee Creek Nation, Cherokee Nation, and the Band of Cherokee Indians, recognizing and commending Shekinah Maxwell, recognizing and commending Deanwell S. Wilburn, recognizing and commending Dr. Soni Badu, First Lady Annie Badu, and the Rock Hill Church family, commending Chance Cessna, United States of America's Miss Georgia 2023, and recognizing and commending Up-Level Communications. And for other purposes, that completes the reading of the privileged resolutions.
Is there an objection to adopting the privileged resolutions? Chair hears none. The resolutions are adopted. For what purpose does Chairman Knight rise?
Make a motion.
State your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that rules be temporarily suspended so that a bill may be read for the first time and assigned to committee.
Clerk will read the caption.
Unnumbered House Resolution by Representative Knight of the 134th, creating the House Study Committee on Funding for the Technical College System of Georgia.
Did you read the caption, Mr. Clerk? On the gentleman's motion that the rules of this House be temporarily suspended so a bill can be read for the first time and assigned to committee, is there objection? Rules. For what purposes, Chair Lady Cooper rise?
To make a motion, Mr. Speaker,
State your motion.
I move that the rules be temporarily suspended so that a bill may be read for the first time and assigned to a committee.
Clerk will read the caption.
Unnumbered House Resolution by Representative Cooper of the 45th and others, creating the House Study Committee on Certificate of Need Modernization.
On the lady's motion that the rules of the House be temporarily suspended so that a bill can be read for the first time and assigned to committee, is there objection? Rules. For what purposes Representative Maynard rise?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion.
State your motion.
I'd like the rules to be temporarily suspended so a bill can be read for the first time and assigned to committee.
Clerk will read.
Unnumbered House Resolution by Representative Maynard of the 56th, recognizing Miss Charlene Hunter Galt and dedicating a road in her honor.
On the lady's motion that the rules of the House be temporarily suspended so a bill can be read for the first time and assigned to committee, is there objection? Transportation. Representative Maynard is recognized for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion that we disagree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 142.
Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption?
House Bill 142 by Representative Boehner, the 56, and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 8 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to campus policemen, so as to provide for the establishment of unified campus police forces through agreements entered into by colleges and universities.
Representative Maynard is recognized to explain the Senate amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I can please have your attention, I would love everybody to vote yes to this disagree. It's the Atlanta University Campus Police Bill. Every single university and college in the state of Georgia is against this amendment, so please vote yes so we can get the students safe in the state of Georgia. Thank you so much.
On the gentlelady's motion that the House disagree to the Senate amendment, is there any objection? Chair hears none, and the House has disagreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 142. Okay, members, we're going to move back to the rules calendar. We have a few bills that we carried over that are on our rules calendar now. We're awaiting a new supplemental rules calendar that will be out shortly. So if you will, moving on to the rules calendar. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to SB 1?
Senate Bill number 1 by Senator Donizell, the 27th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 and Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to general provisions regarding state government so as to remove the automatic repealer on the prohibition on state and local governments from requiring proof of COVID vaccination for government services. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Public Health, that committee recommends that this bill do pass.
For informational purposes, before Chairman Jones presents the bill, we do have a number of folks who have signed up to speak, and we have a minority report. Chairman Todd Jones is recognized to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome back from lunch. I have the privilege of carrying Senate Bill 1 by Senator Dolezal. Senate Bill 1 is a simple bill. It extends in perpetuity the current law as it relates to the COVID-19 vaccination status by removing the sunset clause on line 40 of the bill. That's all this bill does. The current law prevents government and all of its subdivisions, agencies, and authorities from discriminating against citizens and denying services based on COVID vaccination status. Mr. Speaker, that is the extent of the bill, and I'll yield for questions.
Gentlemen, you want to yield for a question?
Yes, sir.
To your left, Representative Park Cannon is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you yield?
Yes, Representative.
Is the COVID-19 pandemic over?
Representative Park, from Everything that I have read and based on the knowledge that I have received from studying the data, I would indicate to you that I believe that it is. We've also heard that from certain parts of Washington. But at the end of the day, this is not a bill on whether or not the pandemic is over or whether or not it's still ongoing, but rather this is a bill that says we are not going to allow the state, its agencies, or its subdivisions or authorities to discriminate against any Georgia citizen for services that they are due.
And a follow-up question, do you yield?
Yes, Representative.
Thank you for that answer. And so for those who are differently abled or maybe handicapped or more sensitive to infectious disease, how does this bill impact their livelihood?
Well, I can't speak for all 10.7 million Georgians other than the fact that I believe in their freedom and their liberty. I expect them to take all the proper precautions just like they did before 2020, and I'm sure they will continue to do that, and frankly, I encourage them to do that.
Gentleman, yield for one more.
Yes, sir.
Representative Roman, straight out in front of you.
Hi, does the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Thank you. It's kind of a two-part question. How does this impact private entities
This does not impact private entities
at all?
at all.
So, but would their contracts be in any way, shape, or form impacted if they do require a COVID vaccine for their employees, but they do work for the state?
What a private company does and a private organization does is basically a contract amongst themselves, and we encourage that.
Okay, thank you.
Gentleman has one more question that popped up. Chairman Saines, to your left, has a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that the CDC marked this pandemic over while this protection was in place and Georgia citizens had this right?
That is true. As I referenced, we have seen Washington and its affiliates, some of them say that, and in fact, you are correct.
Gentleman has no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well, and I ask for your favorable consideration on SB 1.
The gentleman has yielded the well. We will now have up to 30 minutes for those to speak to the bill that are opposed. Representative Al is represented for a presentation. Representative.
Oops. My clown nose fell off. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak in opposition to SB 1. And I have to say that speaking against this bill really feels like deja vu all over again, because I remember when this bill was heard last year on the Senate side, back when it was called SB 345. So this bill aims to eliminate the ability for government agencies, including public schools, to require COVID vaccination, quote, as a condition of providing any service or access to any facility. So while it's important to note that no Georgia public schools at present require the COVID vaccine for attendance, the harm posed by bills like this are not abstract. So first, while we know much more about COVID-19 at this point in the pandemic, we cannot anticipate future events, variants, or public health needs. Bills like this tie our hands with respect to the response we can provide, and it limits our toolbox whether we think we need the tools at present or not. So last year, when this bill was called SB 345, Senate Republicans in the HHS committee, my good friends and colleagues, added 2 amendments, both of which we can see in the text of this bill as it stands right now. The first amendment we can see in lines 35 through 39. This was added by Senator Chuck Hufstetler, and this made sure that we didn't ban hospitals and health systems from requiring COVID vaccination of their patient-facing employees, because that would run afoul of CMS requirements for entities that care for Medicare and Medicaid patients. And I think we can agree this is a good amendment, as generally speaking, it's good to not write bills that violate federal law. The second amendment was also a good one, proposed by Senator Dr. Dean Burke, which you can see in line 40. This amendment proposed a 1-year sunset provision on the prohibition of COVID vaccine requirements. Senator Burke, of course, is no longer serving in the Senate because he has been appointed to be the Chief Medical Officer at the Department of Community Health. His reasoning for the sunset provision at the time was that it minimized the effect of SB 345 because we should not tie our own hands when it comes to the ability to respond to future public health crises. SB 1 now eliminates the sunset provision, expanding the potential for this limitation indefinitely. So beyond the specifics, bills like this, seeking to undermine the COVID vaccine, have the effect, in fact, of undermining confidence in all vaccines, including those for polio, the measles, the chicken pox, bacterial meningitis, the list goes on. And whether this was the intended consequence or not, this rise in vaccine hesitancy, supported in part by state governmental efforts to undermine trust in public health, is in fact what we have seen here in Georgia and nationally in the past few years. In other words, we've seen how even a limited version of SB 1, passed last year, is already inflicting demonstrable and lasting harm. And we've seen the way that doubt and cynicism, misinformation, and the undermining of confidence in public institutions has caused cracks in the foundational elements keeping our society safe and indeed free. We have a responsibility in this body because what we say here matters. I think we would all agree on that since we serve in this body. And what we legitimize in our discourse, what issues we focus on in this chamber, what we write into law, this all matters, right? Because for good or for bad, people are listening to us. Whether explicitly or not, bills like this give oxygen to the idea that people should be skeptical of the demonstrated safety and efficacy of a vital public health tool that here in the state of Georgia is still vastly underutilized. Further, this bill limits the Department of Public Health from having all options at its disposal to do the often impossible job we ask of them day after day. This bill is not about our current environment or the current state of the COVID pandemic, which is ongoing, or what we need to require or prohibit right now. This bill is about limiting our ability to respond in the future to circumstances we may not currently be able to anticipate. So one point I need to make here is that pandemics work very quickly. We saw that 3 years ago. This legislature, as we can see, works quite slowly. This is why we should not write limits to our pandemic response into law, the same reason that I don't lay out my kids' clothes 2 weeks in advance because I cannot possibly anticipate what the weather is going to look like. So I recognize that one of the easiest things to do in this chamber is to stand up here and talk and talk and talk and talk, right? I recognize, however, also that one of the hardest things to do in this chamber is to persuade people. But I ask of my colleagues to please, please, please think critically on this issue and view this not through a partisan lens, and simply consider that it should not be the role of this legislature, again, to dictate what public health tools can be at our disposal, even if we don't want to use them right now. Don't burn your bridges, and maybe more importantly than that, do not give people the impression that bridges cannot be trusted. More than any one bill, more than just this bill, what we say here matters. So consider what you say with your vote today, and please vote no on SB 1, this bill that undermines public health. Thank you. I yield the well.
Lady has yielded well. Representative Hutchinson is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're tired of COVID. We're all tired of COVID. I'm tired of COVID. I really wish COVID was not a part of our everyday lives, but unfortunately it still is. We still have people who wear masks. We're not mandated to wear masks, but some people have compromised immune systems, or whatever personal reason they decided they want to wear masks because they might be afraid of COVID. You know, we're not losing 200 people a day like we were during the height of COVID, but Georgia has lost over 40,000 people to COVID and over 1 million across this country. I want to digress a minute. I'm a social worker. Prior to my election in 2018, we have a lot of new people. Prior to my election, I did not hang out at the Capitol. I did not know the intricacies of what people or party can pass what or chair what. Or when I first got here, I am from New Orleans, for the new people. My husband's from Georgia. We decided while we were dating that we could not talk about any form of football whatsoever. Not college, not professional, nothing. So when Atlanta United announced that they were having a professional soccer team, we signed up for season tickets before there was even a name. So I have 4 Atlanta United superfans at my house. When I was running, somebody asked, what's the first thing you're going to do on your first day of office? And I said, probably not much, but I will start Atlanta United Day. I was elected in November 2018. They won the MLS Cup in December of 2018. So when I was sworn in January, that Atlanta United Day was already started. So I joined, reached across the aisle, joined the effort, and the person I was working with in the House said, I don't like license plates. So when the Atlanta United license plate bill comes, I want you to carry it. I didn't know any better. That was probably my first week as a freshman here. But I was very excited until the lobbyist called me out the day before the vote to say he made the executive decision that a freshman from the minority party could not pass a license plate bill. That was my first lesson here about what I could and could not do. So I've been watching, and things that I thought before I came here just didn't turn out to be, such as medical autonomy. I kind of thought that was a one-sided thing. I kind of thought that we only talked about medical autonomy when we were talking about reproductive rights. But then I learned by watching the debates about masks and vaccines that these are very personal medical decisions that people make with their doctors without the interference of government. Parental rights, utmost importance when we're talking about vaccines, when we're talking about making decisions for children. But there were also times like trans bills where parents have no rights. I thought local control was a huge thing until redistricting, and local bills were hijacked. And that's why I am confused about this bill. Can somebody, I'm truly, truly confused. When does local control matter? Because I represent Snellville. If the next bird flu or raccoon flu or coyote flu hits Snellville, if this passes, it will limit what we can do to protect my constituents from raccoon flu. And believe me, I have a lot of raccoons in my yard, so I am concerned about raccoon flu. But if this bill passes, will Snellville have the authority to control what happens in Snellville so that we don't spread raccoon flu? Reading this bill, I don't think so. When COVID first broke out, and even after and even now, we were criticized as a country that we did not have a safety plan. We didn't have a backup plan if something like COVID hit the planet, which it did. I feel like SB 1 is sending us back into the unknown. If we don't have the ability at the municipality where these things are coming out, how will we control for the next outbreak? And that is my concern. So I'm asking you, for the sake of raccoon flu or coyote flu or whatever flu comes up next year, let's vote no on SB 1 and keep local control where it belongs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Lady has yielded the well. Representative Nulowitz is recognized to speak to the bill. Representative Nulowitz.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I actually prefer the term trash panda, but that's not what my speech is about. I actually rise before you today to share my concerns with SB 1. We know, and we have the data that proves to us, that the vaccine rate for routine childhood immunizations has decreased in Georgia. Measles, bacterial meningitis, polio. The rates for all of these childhood vaccines has declined in Georgia. These are completely preventable diseases, and they have devastating consequences for the children and adults who contract these diseases, or even if they are simply exposed to these diseases. For example, if an unvaccinated child exposes their teacher to measles, and if their teacher is expecting a child, the consequences for that unborn child are potentially lethal. In Cobb County, where I'm from, COVID wasn't actually the first time students had to miss school because of an outbreak. In the fall of 2019, in fact, there was a measles outbreak in a middle school in Cobb County that kept almost 24 students out of school for several weeks. Alarmingly, and this is what really disturbs me, this outbreak, this measles outbreak, was never even reported to public health officials. They happened to learn it when they were trying to trace what could have happened with an outbreak that began in Florida, and they realized it was in Georgia, and then they realized that kids had had the measles and nobody had told the Department of Public Health. That is deeply concerning. The root of this outbreak was parents who I think sincerely believed they were acting in the best interest of their children by not vaccinating them. But these parents were in all likelihood making these decisions based on a stream of misinformation that is perpetually churned from a fire hose held by those who, the reality is, stand to make a whole lot of money out of this industry of vaccine disinformation. I have spent years now in my role as a House member immersed in the world of anti-vaccine misinformation, and I'm telling you, there is a lot of money that a lot of folks are making. So it is to their economic benefit that they have policies like this, like SB1 that we're discussing today, because it continues to erode that faith in vaccines. I am an advocate for vaccines because I am so aware of how critical these vaccines are to the health of all Georgians, and by extension to our economy. If we learned anything from the pandemic, and we learned a lot, I hope, it's that a healthy workforce is critical to every business in Georgia. Thus, I am baffled that any employer wouldn't encourage their employees to be vaccinated against any illness as well as their families, because we also know when your kids are sick, your employee isn't able to come to work. It's troubling then to hear elected officials who purport to want a strong, vibrant, healthy Georgia for our individual Georgians and for our economy to be talking about policies that do undermine that faith in vaccines. We know that discussions like those behind SB1 do erode public faith in vaccines. There is data on this also. A lot of scientists have been studying this. We've had a pretty large sample size for the past few years. We know that the potential consequences of this anti-vaccine, anti-science rhetoric is incalculable. Yet we continue with these discussions because all of us in this room hear from a handful of activists who continue to perpetuate this pervasive culture of misinformation. I know that the cohort of folks that emails me about any legislation having to do with vaccines, anything the past few years having to do with the pandemic, the same parents who wanted parental authority, y'all know that term, the same parents who wanted parental authority to choose whether they can have their children vaccinated, to choose whether their children have a mask, the ones who send me information from these organizations that are making a lot of money spreading vaccine misinformation. It's the same folks who emailed me when they love this bill. I always know when I need to be on the lookout for a vaccine bill because I start to get emails from the same group of folks, and I'm sure y'all also have similar cohorts of parents. Again, I do believe they love their children intensely and they think they're doing the right thing. I also know that they have been misled. Equally concerning is the rise of similar sentiments that aren't just anti-science, they're not just anti-vaccine, but they're anti-scientist. They're anti-scientist. Georgia is home to the CDC. It makes me heartsick and continues to have made me heartsick over the years to see people who I know and otherwise respect saying the most awful things about the CDC, because you know what it really is, and I've told this to my friends and family who live out of state who would say things about the CDC or maybe say some conspiracy. I'm like, you understand that in Atlanta, these aren't just a bunch of really smart scientists. They're our neighbors. They're members of our community. They're the people that our kids play soccer with. They're the people we're behind line at the Publix. They're the people who we're going to cheer for the Atlanta United with, or maybe the Saints. Who knows? Your mileage may vary. Wanted to make sure y'all are listening. Who dat? These CDC scientists are not only the experts in our fields, in their field, not my field, their field. I'm really good at talking. These CDC scientists are not only the experts in their fields, but they are our neighbors, right? We know them. We know they're not part of some kind of conspiracy. We know they're not part of any nefarious plot. They're just trying to do the work that they have been trained to do. Frankly, I think that these scientists at the CDC are patriots. Again, it bothers me greatly to know that we are having policy discussions that one way or another undermine the work of these Americans who are working to keep us safe and alive and healthy, and they're doing it right here in our backyard. I'm grateful for their work. I'm grateful for the work of all of the public health employees who continue to plod ahead through the morass of disinformation and public policy proposals that serve only to undermine their life's work. I urge you to vote against this bill. I urge you to support our public health officials. I urge you to support vaccines in Georgia. I yield the well.
Representative Drenner is recognized to speak to the bill.
I got 12 minutes worth of information.
11 and a half. 11 and a half.
I got 9 pages here to talk about. Just so you all know, I spent the last 3 years dreaming about the day that I would get to come down here and talk about COVID again. Right? Every one of us in this chamber has been impacted by COVID. First, where you live during a pandemic matters. Second, how old you are during a pandemic matters. Third, what you do for a living during a pandemic matters. And fourth, who is running your response matters. So demographics, geography, social status, party affiliation, and federal-state relationships matter during a pandemic. The federal response to COVID was to avoid a national strategy on what was a national problem that put Americans' reaction apart from the rest of the world. There was a different response in every state, and no other country was the level of friction between national and subnational governments as high as it was in the United States. Everybody's sleeping now in the back. Remember, I have 11 more minutes to go. Thank you, Karen. These decisions shaped 2 basic patterns. First, the decisions that each state were not just reactions to the virus, but were embedded in a far longer and much wider policy stream. Second, these decisions are clustered in important ways, with groups of states following different tactics. There were many arguments for allowing the states to take the lead. To begin with, the virus did not flare up uniformly. As the disease developed, they had surprising patterns, hitting both urban areas and rural hotspots. You may recall that it hit food processing plants here in Georgia. So crafting a single strategy proved extraordinarily difficult. Most notably in the early weeks of the crisis, the lockdown decision was the central public policy action. The pivotal question was whether the lockdown decisions followed the seriousness of the outbreak. Sadly, the death rate provided the best evidence of the severity of the disease, and it was the most uniform national measure, even though reporting problems made even this measure hard to collect. The timing of the governor's decisions was not directly connected with the seriousness of their problems. The pattern of state responses showed that the lockdown in March voted for President Trump at a much lower rate and tended to have a weaker Republican control of their state governments. The decision to lock down was also consisted with a broad collection of disparate policy decisions over a long time. For example, consider the connection between a governor's lockdown decisions and a state previous decision to expand Medicaid as a part of the Affordable Care Act. In the states that did not lockdown in March, almost 2/3 had decided not to expand Medicaid. There were also stark differences in the state's investment in their public health programs. The outbreak of COVID has laid bare a trio of fundamentally essential issues. The first is the relationship between the federal government and the states, the relation among the states, and what is at the point here today is the relationship between the states and their localities. In Georgia, the frictions between the state and the local governments boiled over with fierce battles over who had the authority to set the rules for citizens, which businesses could stay open, and under what circumstances. This intergovernmental confusion meant that it was impossible to get an accurate picture of the disease, its spread, and its health implications. In fact, the benchmark data for tracking COVID increasingly came not from government sources, but instead from private and nonprofit organizations, including a collaborative of media organizations that created their own COVID tracking project. Now, I know at this point all of you are like, why is she continuing to go on? Right? I heard you, Penny. I'm going on because the most enduring questions that has emerged from this COVID outbreak is whether governments in the United States failed, or at least did not succeed as Americans needed it to, precisely because it relied so heavily on the states as laboratories which produce such wide-ranging experiments. The questions you should be asking is, did some states develop strategies that, given the problems they face, produce significantly better outcomes? Did frictions in the system between Washington and some states, between many states and between some states' capitals and their local governments create much higher risk and cost more lives? These questions require us to sustain and examine, because it's impossible to escape the conclusion that the country's initial response was successfully less so than other countries. Its response, in turn, weakened the public's trust and widened political polarization at precisely the time that citizens and business leaders struggled to determine who to believe. That's really what's at issue today in SB 1, is who do we believe? We are preempting local governments again. Today was DeKalb Day. DeKalb was one of the first counties in the state to shut down, to issue a mask mandate, which was taken at issue by the state. Preempting local governments from reacting to a pandemic is the least efficient way to control a pandemic. I would encourage you, I know everybody wants to go. I probably have, 5 more minutes left? I'm thinking about maybe singing a song. In all seriousness, the pandemic was probably the most serious crisis our country faced and continues to face, and eliminating local control is not the way to move forward. I ask you to vote no for SB 1. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to go sit down now.
The lady has wisely yielded the will. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. We do have a minority report for up to 20 minutes. Representative Ann Allen Westbrook is recognized for the first part of the minority report. Representative, you will control the time on the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon, colleagues. I rise to speak against SB 1 because it taints what should be a straightforward public health measure with partisan politics, and it needlessly puts Georgians at risk for preventable illness. We know that COVID-19 has been unfortunately politicized in a way that other diseases have not been. And that was a conscious choice made by political leaders, people like us, people in this body, national leaders, amplified by, I would argue, some of the less reputable media outlets in our country also played a part in that. And the choice that they made was to prioritize political posturing and a distorted view of individual liberty over the health of Americans. And what was the result of that? We lost so many lives unnecessarily because of that choice. But going forward, we can choose better. We can make a different choice. We do not have to continue to make public health a partisan political issue. It is a fact that the COVID vaccine saved lives and continues to save lives. All of us, prior to 2020, had not experienced life in a global pandemic. None of us had. And what we have seen since then is more than 1 million Americans have died, including about 42,000 Georgians. But fortunately, we have a vaccine for COVID-19. It was created, evaluated, and authorized for use in about a year. Researchers were able to leverage previous coronavirus and vaccine research to develop a vaccine for this disease in record time. And what does that vaccine do? It does what vaccines do. It reduces transmission and reduces the severity of illness to save lives. Our message about this should be that this is a feat of science and innovation. This is a good thing. We should be shouting this from the rooftops, and that's what we should have been doing for 3 years, but we're not. We're playing political games. It should not be our message. This only works if people get the vaccine, and we have a role to play as leaders in making sure that people do that. SB 1 does not send that message. It uses our powerful platform as leaders to give oxygen to misinformation, and it sets people up to contract and transmit a preventable disease. Meanwhile, our Georgia Department of Public Health is communicating accurate information about COVID vaccines and accurate information about other vaccines. If you go to their website, you will see information about requirements for some vaccines in some circumstances and recommendations for vaccines in other circumstances. It is consistent in its messaging of confidence and trust that these are life-saving measures that we should be encouraging Georgians to take part in. And we are going to contradict that for politics? That is bad policy and bad governance. Unfortunately, as some of my colleagues have noted, the harm done by this bill is not limited to COVID-19. Misinformation, much like viruses, has a tendency to spread, and there's a very unfortunate spillover effect with COVID-19 vaccine misinformation. It leads to mistrust of other types of vaccination, including vaccinations we have been relying on for decades. Vaccines to address measles and other childhood illnesses. Measles was considered eradicated in the year 2000, and we're now seeing outbreaks of this preventable illness in American children because of misinformation. Last year in Ohio, 77 children under the age of 5 got sick with measles. 1/3 of those were hospitalized. Speaking to the parents here, do you remember what it was like when you had a child under 5 and that child got sick? Especially maybe if you were a new parent and it was your first child. It's terrifying. And we are allowing a situation where misinformation is leading to children being hospitalized when they don't need to be. This is not something we used to see in the US. We didn't see this level of vaccine hesitancy that we see now. At the same time of that Ohio outbreak, there was a study from the Kaiser Family Foundation that reflected a significant rise in parents who oppose vaccine requirements in schools. That's grown significantly since 2019. That's a direct result of the pandemic, how we mishandled it, and the way we let misinformation grow. You can draw a direct line from bills like SB 1 to vaccine hesitancy, to lower vaccination rates, to outbreaks of preventable illness in children. There is a relationship between and among those things. So in closing, I just want to remind us all of the position of influence and power that we have just from the fact that we sit in these seats. The choices we make as leaders matter. Are we going to be a voice for accurate, evidence-based information? Or are we going to join the loud chorus of folks who like to sow distrust and spread misinformation? We cannot put good information and bad information on an equal plane, and that's what SB1 does. We can't do it when the stakes are this high. The stakes are our neighbor's health. So I ask you, please vote no on SB1, and I yield the well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The lady has yielded well. Representative Lisa Campbell is recognized to speak to the bill as part of the minority report. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, today I rise against Senate Bill 1, and I encourage everyone in this chamber to take just a few minutes, and I promise a few minutes, to think about the long-term positive impact we could have on our children's health by voting no. This bill allows the prohibition against requiring proof of COVID vaccination to stand, not just this year, but permanently. And as we mark the second anniversary of the U.S. COVID-19 vaccination campaign, understanding the impact of vaccines on reducing disease burden is needed to inform our future evidence-based action on this bill today. It has been almost 2.5 years since the first COVID vaccine was given in the U.S., and since then, listen to this, y'all, we have administered more than 655 million doses. 80% of the population has received at least one dose, with the cumulative effect of preventing more than 18 million additional hospitalizations. 18 million hospitalizations were prevented, and more than 3 million additional deaths. In early 2021, when the COVID vaccines were widely distributed, there was a huge demand. We remember it, right? At the peak of the vaccination campaign, 4 million people got vaccinated in one day. That demand dropped off by the summer, and 2 years later, many states are still barely north of 50% of people fully vaccinated, including in Georgia. So how many lives would have been saved if that slump in vaccine demand had never happened? Have you ever wondered about this? To answer that question, Brown University and Microsoft researchers calculated the peak vaccination rate for each state, and then imagined that that rate continued until all adults in the state were fully vaccinated. The total for the country is stark. Yes, many of the nearly 1 million COVID deaths took place in 2020 before vaccines, but from December 2020 through November 2022, these researchers estimate that the COVID vaccination program could have prevented more than 18.5 million additional hospitalizations and 3.2 million additional deaths. Without vaccination, there would have been nearly 120 million more COVID-19 infections. The vaccination program also saved the U.S. $1.15 trillion in medical costs. And these numbers are even more striking in certain states where more than half of the deaths could have been avoided. Half of the deaths could have been avoided. In Georgia, at least 13,000 deaths could have been averted by vaccination, according to that research. So in addition to tying our hands to prevent ongoing illness, it is worth noting the trends of declining COVID vaccination rates, as others have shared, are increasingly spilling over into other routine immunizations. Did y'all know that Georgia is the 4th least vaccinated state in the nation? Number 1 for business, but number 48th for vaccination rates. And that's for all vaccinations, not just COVID. And studies have found that Georgia ranks in the bottom for vaccine rates for our children, for flu, 47th for adults for flu, and 42nd for the number of adults even vaccinated for tetanus. These trends began before the pandemic, and our historically low rates are worsening. According to the new data from CDC that shows the percentage of U.S. children entering kindergarten, their required immunizations fell to 93% in 2022, 2 percentage points below the recommended herd immunity levels of 95%, and lower even still than vaccination rates in 2021. And while 1 or 2 percentage points might not seem concerning, 1% represents tens of thousands of people, children, who may be inadequately protected from diseases we can easily prevent through immunization. These trends are alarming, both for our health and our finances. The CDC estimated that vaccinating children born from 1994 to 2018 would prevent 472 million illnesses. That's why we're talking about this. It would prevent nearly 30 million hospitalizations and more than 1 million deaths. The state-run vaccination requirements are also projected to save $479 billion in healthcare costs and other related costs. Our unvaccinated are at great risk because the disease vaccines prevent have few effective treatments. Even in this day of great medical advances, children who are unvaccinated are not protected against the suffering, the complications, and the long-term disability that can come from vaccine-preventable diseases. And one last thought. Everyone in this chamber who cheers "Go Dogs" after every single prayer, just know that we personally benefited from required proof of vaccinations for measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, tetanus, hepatitis B, TB. Why in the world are we going to be denying these same protections for students? All of this comes down to trust. Whether our political leadership creates the climate of trust in the public health agency's efforts, in the science, in the ability of our healthcare system to deliver. This is not about discrimination. It is, in fact, about the health of all Georgians. And for all of these reasons, I ask you to please seriously consider voting no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
The lady has yielded the well. That completes the minority report. Now we'll have for up to 20 minutes for chair's time. Chair Lady Cooper is recognized for the chair's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, but I would like to yield my time to Chairman Todd Jones.
Chairman Jones is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate it, and I appreciate my colleagues providing that information, but I'd like to be able to provide the chamber with, I'll just say, maybe something else to think about. I think first and foremost, let's think about what the last year has brought upon for us. I think we have had, I'll say, an upward right trajectory within our state, and that has been with this law in place. By taking out the sunset, we don't do anything to take the trajectory off fine. I think the second thing, we heard a lot about undermining public trust, undermining public health. I think that's just a fallacy. Let me think about this for just one moment. In the latter parts of 2020, President-elect Joe Biden said, "Who is going to take the shot? Are you going to be the first person to take it?" Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, when referring to the development of the vaccine, said it's untrustworthy. We did not hear either party talking about undermining the public health, but I could keep going. Dr. Fauci said all 3 vaccines are 100% effective against death and hospitalization. I think if given the opportunity, he would sit in this well and say, I was wrong. This bill is not about whether or not we can have an argument over is it or isn't it in terms of the pandemic and the treatment of such. What we're saying is we're not going to permit discrimination. We do not want discrimination when it comes to the state, its subdivisions, its agencies, its authorities to be able to provide services, necessary services to our citizens. Another speaker talked about the ability to wear masks. I say, please do so. It is absolutely your individual right to wear a mask and take the vaccine. If you'd like, get a booster every 4 weeks. I encourage that. In terms of the speaker that spoke to the idea that this was going to undermine the state's ability to attack other pandemics, and let's hope in all of our lifetimes there's not another pandemic. But if there is, this bill only speaks to the COVID vaccine. It does not speak to any other animal vaccine or any other animal flu. In terms of what we can do as a state, good or bad, we have data that tells us over the last 2.5 years, we have had educational loss that is generational for our children. We know what we have done. It needs to be fixed, and that gap needs to be closed, and we will do that. Let's talk a little bit about mistrust. It was commented by a speaker regarding the mistrust of certain news agencies. Let's talk about what happened to the public square, and the new public square being that one made up online of Twitter and Google and Facebook and Meta and Instagram. Let's talk about who was told you're deplatformed. Let's talk about who was told your content is wrong. This is supposed to be the public square that is supposed to be a free exchange of information and ideas and brainstorming, but yet what happened? You were basically shut down if you did not follow what, as we turned out to know, certain federal agencies did not want you to say on those particular platforms. Another comment was made about children. We all get very, I'll say, melancholy. We all get very serious when it comes to our children, and we should. Again, this isn't a bill about the efficacy or not efficacy of the vaccine or whether or not we should do this or that, but let's get the facts straight. Children underneath the age of 17, statistically, they literally were 25% to 50% less fatality rate for COVID than for the annual flu. We don't shut down schools, we don't shut down economies, we don't shut down states, and we definitely don't discriminate against our citizens because of the annual flu. Why would we suddenly want to do it now? The last 2 points I would like to make, hopefully, will give a little bit of, I guess, a clearer story of my feelings. There is no intent to undermine any other vaccines. To my colleague in the minority party, I absolutely agree with her, and I truly believe that MMR, polio, etc., those are absolutely critical, and I hope that we still see that. I don't have grandkids yet, but when they do, I expect to be able to push those through. But making the assumption that this bill not just undermines the vaccine, but what the minority party did not contemplate inside of any of their comments was natural immunity. We never heard the phrase of natural immunity and what that would do in terms of helping our citizens be able to fight this virus. And I think it is something that is definitely not considered. Further, we know from listening to scientists that the lethality of this virus, just like others, started high and came down low. We also know more about the comorbidities, and we can keep going in terms of the effect that they had. But ultimately, that's not what this bill is about. This bill is simple. This bill does not allow the state, its subdivisions, its agencies, its authorities to discriminate. We don't want people to be discriminated against to not get a fishing license, to not get a hunting license, and not get their driver's license. But I will give you one that I would say is more important than all of that. We don't want a subdivision of this state to even consider saying for you to vote, there's a requirement like this. And let's think about that for a moment. Mr. Speaker, that ends my comments, and I ask for the favorable consideration from the body for SB 1.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. For what purpose is Representative Anulowicz rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that the reason we are all encouraged to get a new flu shot every year is because not only does our natural immunity wane over time, there are also new strains of the flu each year that we want to be prepared for with that continued routine vaccination? Again, to address the new strains of the flu that may emerge and the fact that natural immunity can and does wane.
I'm sure the lady believes what she so states. For what purpose is Representative Jason Ridley rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is it not true that this week alone that in COVIDGeorgia.com says that there's only 377 COVID hospitalizations in the whole state of 10.5 million? And also, is it not further true that it says regardless of the reason for admission, meaning that they're not there for COVID alone? And also, the CDC says that there's 1,347 flu hospitalizations this week, 4 times of what COVID is. So I'm pretty sure the pandemic is over.
If the gentleman so states, for what purpose does Representative Byrd rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true the most local government is the individual? And further, is it not true this is about personal responsibility and medical freedom?
I'm sure the lady believes what she so states. For what purpose does Representative Roman rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it not true that up to 52,000 people die from the flu per year? However, we had over 1 million people die from COVID so far in the United States?
I'm sure the lady has correct figures and believes in what she states.
One more, if I may.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that unlike the flu, we've only had a few years to study COVID, and we're trying to do our best to mitigate the negative impacts because we're now finding people like myself are developing long COVID symptoms as a result of infection?
If the lady so states, she knows how she feels. That's for sure. For what purpose does Representative Sharper rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that regardless if you vote yes or no on this bill, that the CDC and other agencies that track how many people have COVID, they are not aware that a lot of these people that are getting COVID that are taking home tests are not reported, but you have several people that are still getting COVID every single day that are doing home testing that we will never know about. Thank you.
If the gentleman so states, for what purpose does Representative Maynor rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that I firmly disagree in the government forcing people to do things? And I would be voting yes for this bill, but I want to support my party, and I'm going to vote no for it.
I'm sure the lady knows what she speaks. Taking one more, Representative Barnes. For what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, please.
You can make written comments if you'd like. For what purpose does state your inquiry?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it not true that if we don't continue to take precautions that we may experience another pandemic? So we have to continue to take precautions. Is it not true? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If the lady so states. I'm going to take one more. I've heard from this lady, but we'll hear from again. For what purpose does Representative All rise?
Thank you. Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that the sponsor of this bill discussed educational loss as an incentive for this bill, however, did not discuss how school absenteeism might be affected by eroding or disallowing vaccine standards?
I'm sure the lady believes in what she speaks. Have all members voted? If so, Mr. Clerk, you can lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were at 99, the nays 69. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 6666?
Senate Bill 66 by Senator Hickman of the 4th, to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 1562, the official code of Georgia annotated, relating the number of judges of superior courts, so as to provide for an additional judge of the superior courts of the Atlanta Judicial Circuit. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
The gentleman from the 157th House District, Chairman Werkheiser, is recognized to present the bill.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Bill 66 adds a judicial judge to the Atlantic Circuit, and I will stand for any questions.
The gentleman has no questions.
I'd ask for your favorable consideration. You can stop the stopwatch.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and their clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 163, the nays 0. The bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 106.
Senate Bill 106 by Senator Walker, the 20th, and others, to be entitled an act to amend Article 7 of Chapter 4, Title 49 of the official code of Georgia annotated, relating to medical assistance generally, so as to provide for a 3-year pilot program to provide coverage for remote maternal health clinics services under the Medicaid program. This bill having referred to the Committee on Public Health, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair Lady Cooper is recognized to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I bring you the substitute to House Bill 106, Senate Bill 106. Since we have so many counties that do not have an OBGYN, and we have many areas in our state where there are a number of high-risk pregnancies, women with high-risk pregnancy. We want the department to do a 3-year study and use an advancement in technology. There are now ways to have a woman strap on a type of device around their abdomen, and it can do a quick and very accurate assessment of how the baby is doing in utero. And this is what they would be doing this, and the information would be sent back to an OBGYN to evaluate how things are going, and if there are problems, get them, intervention as soon as possible. That is what the bill simply does. It's an advancement in telemedicine and an advancement with a new type of a device, and I would ask for your favorable consideration of this bill. There are no questions, Mr. Speaker. I will yield the will.
Lady has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee's substitute? Chair hears none. The committee's substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 168, the nays 1. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Resolution 214-214?
Senate Resolution 214 by Senator Ginn of the 47th and others, creating the Joint Study Committee on Local Option Sales Tax and Service Delivery Strategy. This bill having referred to the Committee on Governmental Affairs, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Majority Leader Estration is recognized to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to state law, it's the responsibility of the General Assembly to confirm the appointment of the State Elections Board chairman, and the procedure for doing that is set out in the law, which is one of the bodies has to pass a resolution setting the date and time for that, and then it'd be considered in one body. This resolution would set it for Monday at 11 a.m. that this body would vote on that, and then the Senate would consider the confirmation after that. Be happy to answer any questions.
The gentleman has a question. Does he yield for a question?
Yes, sir.
Minority Leader Beverly has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
What happens if the Senate doesn't confirm?
So that is a good question that I don't have an answer to. My assumption would be that there would be a vacancy, which would then, when we're out of session, leave the governor in a position to make an appointment to fill the vacancy, and we will be back to consider the question of confirming that appointment next session. That's my best guess.
I believe the gentleman answered correctly, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah. Well, nice to have your confirmation, Mr. Speaker, and if there are no further questions, I'd ask the body's favorable consideration. I'll yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there an objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee's substitute? The chair hears none. The committee's substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the resolution now be adopted? All in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the adoption of the resolution. The yeas were 170, the nays 0. The resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Mr. Clerk, if you read the caption to SB 73.
Senate Bill 73 by Senator Tillery, the 19th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of R2, Chapter 5 of Title 46 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to general provisions relative to telephone service so as to provide for class action suits and for damages against certain persons for violating provisions relating to telephone solicitations. This bill having referred to the Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by Rules Committee substitute.
Chairman Tyler Paul Smith is recognized to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of this august body, I bring to you today Senate Bill 73. Senate Bill 73 is in response to an issue we've had here in Georgia law, and basically what we've had is there have been folks that have tried to get around our Georgia no-call provisions whenever somebody were to sign up to not be contacted again by telemarketers and such. They've done this by going over to foreign companies. And so basically the situation presents itself as, you know, we're prohibited by Georgia law from calling these folks, but if you're in a foreign country, you can do this. So what this would do is allow citizens on that do not call list who receive more than one unauthorized telephone solicitation within any 12-month period. They can bring an action against the person or entity that made those solicitations and or the person or entity that the telephone solicitations were made on behalf of for injunctive relief and damages. Mr. Speaker, that's the bill, and I'll yield for 2 questions.
Representative Park Cannon to your left has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair, do you yield?
For a question.
Thank you. Does this implicate elections-related phone calls at all?
Not that I understand. My understanding is that it would not. Thank you for the question.
Chairman Carpenter to your right in the rear has a question.
Does my good friend yield?
If it's about rugs, not drugs, I'm good with it.
You're my man. Question, is it not true that there's one thing that I dislike more than telemarketers, and that is class action lawsuits?
I understand that. You know what? I think you can probably find some metal in this ground right here, my friend from Dalton. Mr. Speaker, with that, I'm going to yield the well and ask this body's favorable consideration.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee's substitute? Chair hears none. The committee's substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? Chair hears none. The Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 162, the nays 7. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Good news, ladies and gentlemen. Yep, we could do that. As soon as we finish that budget that's parked in the back of the room, so everyone needs a copy of the budget that was just passed, hot off the press, you'll need to go back and pick up your own budget over the next few minutes and look at it, because we're going to take up a motion on the budget. So if you want to step back and get a copy of the budget, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll let it stand at ease just for a couple of minutes before we take up our next bill. Go get your budget. We'll stand at ease just for a minute. House will come back to order. House will come back to order. Y'all can start the process, begin the process of digesting a document, an almost perfect document, I should say, that Chairman Hatchett sent over to the Senate. Would that be correct, Chairman Hatchett? It was almost a perfect document. And they did not perfect it. Would that be correct, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to SB 158?
Senate Bill 158 by Senator Robertson, the 29th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 32, Title 33 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to property insurance so as to provide for an insurance premium discount or rate reduction for property owners who build a new residential or commercial property or who retrofit an existing residential or commercial property. This bill will be referred to the Committee on Insurance. That committee recommends this bill do pass by Rules Committee substitute.
The lady from down in Sweet Onion Country, House District 156, Representative Hagan, is recognized to present the bill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I made you a promise a few weeks ago when I brought House Bill 237 that if you would just pass it out of this chamber unanimously, that I would not talk about the soapbox derby anymore. And it seems that I did not keep my word because I've had to talk about it a lot the past week. So I bring to you today Senate Bill 158, which simply designates the Southeast Georgia Soapbox Derby as the state of Georgia's official derby, and I ask for your favorable consideration. And if I don't have any questions, Mr. Speaker, I would be happy to yield the well.
Wow. Did you yield, or did you yield the well, or did you yield for questions?
I'll yield for questions.
Okay. To your left, Representative Al Williams has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentlelady yield?
Of course.
Considering the journey you have taken, is it not true that you're not allowing any bookmakers for our challenge race at the end of the spring?
That would be accurate. But I'm glad you pointed out our challenge race that will be happening on April 28th.
Thank you very kindly.
To your left, Representative Saines, Chairman Saines has a question, if you'll yield.
I yield.
Is it not true that I'm going to be voting yes on this because I would never dare to take a gamble on you?
I appreciate that vote. I yield the well, Mr. Speaker.
Wise choice. The lady has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? The chair hears none. The Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk, will you unlock the machine? Have all members voted? Take your time. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 166 and nays 0. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Representative Holly, you have a
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is it not true that if our members want to have fun away from session and actually do their own part to build up a soapbox to race in, they actually might be contributing some business to the Funeral Home Caucus?
Okay, we're moving right along. Representative Chairman Hatchett is recognized for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this House disagree to the Senate substitute House Bill 19.
A perfect bill. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 19 by Representative Burns, the 159, Jones, the 47th, illustration of the 104th, and others, to be entitled an act to make and provide appropriations for the state fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023, and ending June 30th, 2024.
Chairman Hatchett is recognized to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know that I can explain in any brief amount of time all the differences. All this does is hopefully get us to the table working, and any of y'all that want to join over the weekend, come on, we'll have a party.
Is there any objection? Well, excuse me, on the gentleman's motion that the House disagree to the Senate substitute, is there any objection? Chair hears none, and the House has disagreed to the Senate substitute to HB 19, House Bill 19. Mr. Chairman, we appreciate your work on HB 19 and know that you will continue your diligent search to find a good place, but that the House will hold firm. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Continue that good work. The clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 60, 6-0.
Senate Bill 60 by Senator Hatchett of the 50th and others, to be entitled an act to amend Article 14 to Chapter 1 and Title 10 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to secondary metal recyclers, so as to provide that it shall be illegal for certain persons to purchase, possess, obtain, or sell, or attempt to purchase, possess, or obtain detached catalytic converters. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary and Non-Civil, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Let's see, the gentleman from the 26th House District, Representative McDonald, is recognized to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is a bill that ran out of time last sine die in 2022, so we've decided to recycle it and bring it back for y'all to vote on it today. It's Senate Bill 60 as relates to the secondary metal recyclers. In Section 1 of SB 60 states, it shall be illegal for certain persons to purchase, possess, obtain, or sell, or attempt to purchase detached catalytic converters, use utility wire, or use communications copper. If one in possession of these items, it will be considered contraband, even if the vehicles that are being used to transport it, such items would too be considered to go to process of civil forfeiture. SB 60 is going to give local law enforcement the tool to go after those who are dealing with the theft of catalytic converters and other utility copper wire and cables that has been obtained through theft. HB 60 will regulate and limit the payments allowed by secondary metal recyclers and will require certain registrations for these recyclers. There will be an annual registration period starting January 1st of 2024 and will follow each year thereafter on the 1st of January. We also are implementing a pilot program for the next 2 years that will allow these certified recyclers to be able to pay $100 cash to people that are bringing in recycling, but not limited to catalytic converters, used utility wire, communication copper wire, or batteries. This is a very personal issue that many of us, some former state representatives from Eastman, Georgia, in his first session down here in 2021, had his catalytic converter stolen off his truck twice while serving in the session down here. And back home, we have a nonprofit just right up the street from my personal business, has been hit multiple times, and they're a nonprofit for disabled children. And each time they have been hit in the middle of the day, and it only takes about 30 seconds for these bad actors to go get under a bus, cut the catalytic converter off, throw it in a car, and leave. On my way up, I have a friend right behind me. The clerk just said he's had his catalytic converter stolen. So this is a very personal issue to a lot of us. And what's that? And but I just ask for your favorable consideration, yield to any questions.
The gentleman has a question. Chairman Yerder, right out in front of you, has a question. Chairman Yerder is recognized.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Is it not true that I have a constituent that's a small businessman that's had over a dozen catalytic converters stolen from his business, 6 of which were brand new service vehicles that weren't even used at that time? Thank you for bringing this bill.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, if I have any other questions, I yield the well.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Will you yield for a question?
Yes, sir.
I just had a conversation with the clerk. He left an automobile in the parking deck at the Denver airport. When he came back out, he had a $1,700 bill because someone stole his catalytic converter. Thank you for the bill.
Thank you, sir.
Should have stayed home, shouldn't he?
Yes, sir. Don't leave Georgia. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well and ask for favorable consideration.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee's substitute? The chair hears none. The committee's substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machine. For what purpose is Representative Jason Ridley rise?
Parliamentary inquiry. Mr. Speaker.
State your inquiry.
Well, I don't know how to because I need a question answered. If I don't have a Cadillac, do I not have to worry about this happening?
No, those are two different things. Catalytic converter is not a Cadillac.
Oh, okay.
I know what you're thinking about.
I'm going to vote yes then. Thank you.
Yeah, that's not it. That's not it. I'm glad to straighten that out for you. For what purpose does, oh my goodness, does Representative McCullum rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
I should have asked this question before. I apologize. So if I have a little shop in my backyard and I have a catalytic converter back there, does that mean that I'm breaking the law on this bill?
State that question again.
If I have a little garage in my backyard fixing cars and I have catalytic converters there, does that mean I'm breaking the law?
I'd be careful, but I'm sure the gentleman so states. Probably depends on the law enforcement in your area is probably what it does amount to. For what purpose does Representative Hutchinson rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true, Mr. Speaker, that I was trying to ask the presenter, is this not illegal now? Is it not illegal to steal a catalytic converter today?
I'm not sure of the technical answer to that question, but evidently it's not, or they wouldn't have brought this bill. But it's a good question the lady has. She may want to come speak to the author. Have all members voted? If so, The clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 162, the nays 4. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Not yet. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 164?
Senate Bill 164 by Senator Huffstetler, the 52nd, to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 26 of Title 43, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to nurses so as to provide for licensure of advanced practice registered nurses. This bill is referred to the Committee on Health. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chairman Newton is recognized to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, colleagues. Senate Bill 164 is very similar to a bill we passed earlier in the session, House Bill 215. That dealt with a license for advanced practice registered nurses. Once again, all nurses, all RNs do have a license now, and then they get authorization to practice within an advanced area, whether it's certified nurse midwife, nurse practitioner, CRNA, or a clinical nurse specialist. Senate Bill 164 will allow the nursing board to also give them a particular license for recognizing this additional training that they've gotten rather than just an authorization. It's something that's very desired by those that put in that hard work that's required to get that advanced practice registered nursing degree. There's no change in scope of practice. This also has a second section on it that recognizes anesthesiology assistants. Those are physician assistants, PAs, but they're specifically and exclusively in an area of anesthesiology or anesthesiologist assistant. And so there's a section in the bill that clarifies that their licensure comes just like really identical to all the other physician assistants, but those are more like generalist, and anesthesiologist assistant is like a particular specialty of a physician assistant. I think the two things are great recognition of what we've talked about earlier about the teamwork required in this. I think they're deserving of having their own license or their own section in the code like anesthesiologist assistant. I hope that's something that we can move forward on and once again pass unanimously. I'm glad to answer any questions, Mr. Speaker.
You have no questions.
Thank you, and I appreciate your support on SB 164.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 166, the nays 0. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 74?
Senate Bill 74 by Senator Tillery, the 19th, being entitled an act to amend Titles 10, 15, and 51 of the official code of Georgia annotated relating to commerce and trade, courts, torts, respectively, so as to require the disclosure of the nature and practices of businesses that provide legal services. This bill I refer to the Committee on Judiciary. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Whip Burchett is recognized to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope everybody in this House stays in the same posture as they were in that last vote. Senate Bill 74. If you ever driving down the highway or listening on TV and you see an attorney or lawyer commercial and they're telling you that they're going to deliver 100% of the time and
they're going to deliver X amount of dollars. This, and you don't like hearing that or seeing that, this bill you're going to like. What this bill does, it allows for attorneys or lawyers to advertise, but it doesn't allow for them to essentially misrepresent what they can and can't do. It's okay to say that we've had good outcomes, but it's not okay to say we're 100% winners here, or basically overrepresent what they can do. That's the first part of the bill. It basically regulates the attorneys and lawyers from going beyond just puffing and telling you that they're a good law firm, but going to a point where they're saying, I'm 100% going to be able to deliver for you, and I'm going to get you X amount of dollars. So that's one portion of the bill. In judiciary, we made an amendment, and the amendment we made was the Apex Doctrine that this House has already passed. And what the Apex Doctrine is, just as a review, is a doctrine that allows for protections against unreasonable deposition. So if you do not have unique knowledge of something and you're a high-ranking official, let's just say of a large corporation, and there's no need for you to be deposed or asked to be answer questions because of the knowledge you can get from a lower-ranking official or employee, then there will be a protection for that, a protective order against having to be deposed. And so this is a tort reform measure that we passed earlier on in this session. We've added it on to make sure that it doesn't get vetoed on the other side, to a good piece of legislation that also regulates attorneys when it comes to advertising. Mr. Speaker, that's the basis of the bill, and I'll yield for questions.
To your left, if you yield, Representative Anulowicz has a question. Ladies recognized.
Thank you. Does the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Is it not true that if you are recognized as a super lawyer, you do not actually have superpowers?
That is true. I believe the lady knows of which she speaks.
Thank you.
Also, this if you can't, as an attorney or law firm, you cannot get a stunt double. In other words, a very good-looking man or a good-looking woman to go in your commercial and say, "I'm the lawyer you need," just to get customers. You have to be a lawyer to do that.
Gentlemen, yield.
The gentleman yields.
Got a couple more, if you don't mind. Representative Okoye, in the back to your left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Is it not true that since this chamber is crawling with lawyers, that this bill is in danger of not passing because they're going to vote against it?
I hope that's not the case.
Leader F. Stration is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Sir, isn't it true that you've spent a considerable amount of time this year working on this Apex legislation that's part of this bill here today?
I have.
And isn't it true that the House previously passed an Apex bill out that went over to the Senate?
That is true.
And that Apex bill did not even receive a vote on the floor of the Senate over there, correct?
Has not.
So this very important issue that you're describing, it has only come out of the House, if passed here, twice this year. The Senate hasn't passed this legislation.
That is a fact.
Thank you.
Gentleman knows what he speaks. And I will say this about the Apex Doctrine. This is the number one priority of the business community in the state of Georgia is the Apex Doctrine. And Mr. Speaker,
you have one more question, if you would take it. Accept one more. One of the sharpest legal minds down in southeast Georgia, Representative Williams from the coast, has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know of which you speak. Is it not true that I'm concerned that you're going to cut off some of the better ones? One call, that's all. The rapper that raps quite well. I don't know whether he's gotten up here, but he dominates Savannah. And is it not further true? And I'm really concerned because it was such a relief not to see your fellow barristers doing the political campaigns because there wasn't no room left to buy. I know that you all will be back. Is it not true that I don't know whether you are a defense lawyer or what kind of lawyer are you? I know you make a lot of money down there, Waycross, but how do you do it?
What kind of lawyer do you need?
Mr. Speaker, he's one call, that's all.
Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee's substitute? The chair hears none. The committee's substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. For what purpose does Representative Montahan rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, if an attorney has a, facial hair that was popular back in the 1970s, will that attorney be able to get a stunt double just for that one specific purpose under this bill?
Money will buy anything, the way I see it, but if the gentleman so states, I'm sure he believes that. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 158, the nays 5. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 220-220?
Senate Bill 220 by Senator Goodman of the 8th and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 10 and Title 44 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to historic preservation so as to establish the Georgia Farmland Conservation Fund, Georgia Farmland Conservation Fund Program, and Georgia Farmland Advisory Council. This bill then referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
The agricultural chairman of this House, Chairman Robert Dickey, is recognized to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. Present SB 222, Georgia Farmland Conservation Act and Trust Fund that comes over from my colleague in the 220, excuse me. Thank you, Minority Leader. What this bill's about is establishing a purchase agricultural conservation easement program. 29 other states in our country presently have this, so it's nothing new. It's a state-led initiative to partner with farmers who wish to protect our precious farmland from development. So by working with farmers voluntarily, we'll restrict our development rights and set up this program. This program does not have any funding with it. This is just a mechanism to establish it. This year, it coordinates with federal dollars and local matching funds to extend these conservation easements. USDA presently allocates $450 million nationally for this farmland protection, and Georgia presently is not, of course, receiving its share of that. So it will match one for one, dollar for dollar, if we raise private donations or state funds in the future. But it, protects Georgia's #1 economic sector, agriculture, spans water quality, wildlife habitat, and green space around our developing metro areas, and You know, you see this beautiful farmland out there, and it's just got prohibited for a lot of small farmers to not be tempted to sell their land for apartment complexes, commercial, and this just really keeps a great balance. It's a great voluntary program, and I just think it's something that Georgia needs this year, and it just really gives priority to those type lands that are threatened for development. So I ask your favorable consideration on SB 220. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
You have no questions. You did a great
Thank you. I
job.
yield the well.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee's substitute? The chair hears none. The committee's substitute is adopted. Is there an objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 165, the nays 0. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to SB 199-199?
Senate Bill 199 by Senator Estevez, the sixth, and others, be titled Act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 18 and Title 45 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to State Employees Plan Council, so as to require such council to establish health savings accounts and to continually provide for education or salary reductions for such accounts. This bill having referred to the Committee on Health, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by Rules Committee substitute.
Chairman Chuck Martin is recognized to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, let me first address the rule substitute. This is the same bill that you've had out of committee. There was a Scribner's error on line 26. The date was improperly reflected in the previous version as 2024. It should have been 2025. That's how it came out of the Senate. That's how it came out of committee. Somehow it got changed. So just to address the reason for the rule substitute, it was to fix the Scribner's error. Now to the meat of the bill. There's not a year I've been down here where we haven't had somebody in the employee of Georgia or TRS or ERS come to us and want to enhance the retirement system. Generally, that always costs money. It always costs money. We have a bill this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, that we can pass, and we can pass it, and it does not cost money, and it is good for our employees. This will allow us to implement a health spending account. This is different from a health saving account, a use it or lose it type benefit that happens. This is dollars that would be pre-tax, that you can save. You not pay federal, state income tax. You don't pay FICA on it, and then you could spend it on your health needs if you're part of a high deductible insurance plan. About 5 to 7% of our employees in the state are part of that plan now. We suspect that would go up when this tax benefit is in order. So what we have here is a situation where people can put money aside and pay for their health care costs with pre-tax dollars. That's a big deal. I want to thank Senator Estevez for bringing that to us out of the Senate and allowing me to bring this to you today. So very simply put, this is all enabling, and it asks our department at the state to put the plan together so that folks can have pre-tax dollars to pay for health. The last thing I would add is when you get to be 65, without penalty, you can use these funds for other reasons. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a good enhancement that we want to bring to our employees. The university system offers it to their employees in their system now, and this will save untold dollars for our employees across the state that are able to take advantage of. With that, I'll answer any technical questions that I'm able to.
Gentlemen, yield to your neighbor. Chairman Williamson to your right. Chairman
Thank you, Mr.
Williamson.
Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Absolutely, for a question. Yes, sir.
Is it not further true that not only does it save the employee tax dollars, it also is portable? Should they leave employment, they can take that plan with them? Is that not true?
Absolutely, and I thank the gentleman for the question. Yes, this goes into their health savings account. So this is their money to control, and if they leave the employee at the state, they can take that with them. Further, in reality, it saves the state money as well, because any dollars that go into this plan, the state would not be responsible for their portion of FICA on that dollars, because it's pre-tax money. This just allows our employees to pay for medical expenses with pre-tax dollars. Quite frankly, it allows the federal government to help us help our employees pay for their health care costs. No further questions, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield the well.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? The chair hears none. The Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 164, the nays were 1. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 215-215?
Senate Bill 215 by Senator Brass, the 28th, and others, to be entitled an act to amend Article 4, Chapter 18, and Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to the inspection of public records so as to protect from public disclosure certain personal information of public employees. This bill ever referred to the Committee on Governmental Affairs. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
The gentleman from the 120th, Representative Gaines, is recognized to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pleased to present Senate Bill 215 this afternoon. This is a pro-law enforcement bill that will allow those who put themselves at risk every single day by protecting our communities, allowing those law enforcement officers, if they request their local government to have their personal address removed from county websites, they would be able to do so. Their home address, they could have it removed from Q Public or other county websites. And Mr. Speaker, that's simply what the bill does to help our law enforcement officers who protect us every single day.
Gentleman, yield for a question.
I will.
Whip Park has a question.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Whip, you're
Speaker.
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I will.
So while I almost always appreciate House versions of bills as opposed to the Senate, in this instance, I know the bill seems to have greatly narrowed the scope of the bill just to law enforcement officers as opposed to public employees. Why was the bill narrowed? Just because I think all public employees should otherwise deserve the protections this bill provides.
Sure. So the bill was narrowed. The bill sponsor in the Senate The great Senate Rules Chairman, Matt Brass, had hit the original intent of the bill, and the reason he brought this was a constituent issue related to law enforcement officers. So we worked together to craft a more narrow, tailored bill that addressed his concerns.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, yield for one more question.
I will.
Representative Hutchinson to your right, in the back, towards your back.
Does the gentleman yield?
I will.
To piggyback on my colleague's question, I had a client that found my home address and sent me dead animals to my house. Is there any way we can expand this to cover therapists?
Well, again, this bill, if a legislator wants to bring another measure, certainly that would be up to them. I do believe that certain government employees, judges, and actually I believe state legislators can request their address to be removed from Q Public, but this would make sure that law enforcement can do so, and that's what Senate Bill 215 is here for today. Mr. Speaker, if are there any further questions?
Gentlemen's yield to the well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee's substitute? The chair hears none. The committee's substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 166, the nays 0. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. The distinguished chairman of the Rules Committee is recognized. You're recognized, Mr. Chairman, for an announcement.
Rules Committee will meet in about 3 minutes. 3 minutes, Rules Committee. Thank you.
This House will stand in recess until 4:20.